Hi, everyone. Welcome to journey number 21. Today I'm joined by Germaine Cookson, and I think that we're going to have an amazing conversation here. There's a lot of things we were chatting beforehand on, just I think aligned in a lot of on a lot of different topics. And so I'm excited to get into this. Thank you for being on. And I guess just to start things off, can you tell everybody a little bit about your story? Just give us some context on, where you grew up, what you were like as a kid, and kind of everything up to what led you to what you're doing today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me this morning. Yeah, I've always been mystical and kind of magical, whimsical maybe. Always believed in that there was something else out there. And I guess I've been like that since a little girl. I grew up in England, hence the English accent, even though I now live in Chestermere in Alberta. And I trained in like dance and drama, so I'd always been creative, I'd always has that creative aspect. And then sort of got into sales, and through sales got into some training courses. And through that went on an NLP course, which is neuro linguistic programming. And just that opened my brain like just a vessel and a portal to like just other things that are available to us out there, where we go to school in these mainstream like ways where I think we're just encouraged to go inside a box. And if I'm honest, for me, I never, I didn't fit inside that box. I was a square peg in a round hole, always trying to find kind of my way, always been very passionate. And from doing that course, that just opened things up for me. I started reading more books, and it was around astrology, it was mindfulness, it was relationships, it was everything and everything that just made me go, oh my God, I want to be a life coach. I have to be a life coach. Like there's something here. So I got into training, and I was very fortunate because I used to bring my sort of mindful skills and things I was just learning personally and sort of adopt them and put them into my sales training with my staff. Because to me, if you can use one thing in a personal place, you can move it into a professional place, and it helps on every level. And through that, then I got offered a job. I moved to Canada. Here I am 13 years later. I'm still here. I never went home. And although I do still have a full-time position, I started going into coaching more on a professional level 5 years ago. And from that, it's just takes time. In this day and age, everybody wants to have a YouTube channel. Everybody wants to sort of share their story. And I think in my personal story, I've found that I just need to be me. I just need to be authentic. And for me, that all stems around mindset. So it's not just one specific thing that I coach on now with my clients. It's just everything to do with sort of how the brain looks at things. And from there, we apply that to all different areas of our lives. And I want to grow this. I'd love to be doing this sort of full time. If that's my journey, if that's what I'm meant to be, then I trust that will happen. If I'm always just going to be doing it part-time along with a full-time position, then I'm okay with that as well. Whatever will be, will be.
I love that outlook, and there's a couple things that I'm curious about too, and especially with that drama and artistic background. One of the things that I've only come to realize, call it over the last couple of years, is in my mind I'd always put creativity in a box,
Hmm.
right? And whenever I hear creativity or artistic or whatever it might be, I'm like, okay, that's drama, that's art, that's music, right? Like
Hmm.
that is the box that creativity lives in. And it wasn't, and because of that, because I'm not inclined or have never done anything like that, I went, oh, I'm not creative,
Hmm.
right? But over the last couple of years, it's been this interesting switch on the outlook of seeing that you can be creative in different ways, and being creative in the workplace or, in business or, just in everyday life, that it doesn't fit into that box of creativity. I'm curious just on your thoughts on that. Like, have you, I mean, with that more quote unquote creative background, did you try to bring that into other areas, or was it one day that you just realized like, oh, like I can kind of spread this out all over the place? It doesn't have to be when I'm doing drama or whatever it might be. I can bring this into all aspects of my life.
No, absolutely. And I think from going inside the box, you can flip that to having what we call an outside the box thinking. And I think that in itself is a whole like section on being creative, because we don't think like this. We're open to other things. We're open to being creative. And that creativity for me comes from having an imagination. Doesn't matter whether you're dancing on a stage or whether you're creating a PowerPoint presentation. It's the fact that you've got the ability, and I'm going cold now as I'm telling you. For me, I'm always like, that's my angels. Yeah, it's just, there is that creative aspect to knowing that you can go further than what that book tells you.
Mhm.
Um, for me, the drama background was huge, and I didn't really always see how it was going to transfer into sort of a business world. You know, I was in dance and drama for 20 years, and I qualified as a dance teacher, and I got drama diplomas, and so I was teaching, and I loved it. I then transitioned into wanting to get what I called a normal job. You know, we again try and fit back inside that box, because I think it's that to and fro of what we're supposed to do, and eventually you get to knowing I'm meant to do what I am meant to do. But through that, with the drama aspect, once I got into sales, very quickly somebody recognized my skills or abilities and wanted to get me into training. And I was like, training? Like, what have I got to do for training? Like, I haven't had any, background or been to school or anything about it. They said, Germaine, you have a very infectious energy. And I'm grateful for hearing that. That always is something that I remembered. So, of course, when it started to go forward and I started to train, what am I doing? I'm standing on a stage again. So all those years of experience reciting poetry in competitions, you know, just being on stage as a dancer, when you're training in a business environment, it comes from a performance aspect. So that drama side of it really went, wow, this is why I learned all that. You know, it's not just about you close one door and it's completely gone forever. You might close one door, but as the saying goes, another window opens. You know, you move into another kind of sector of your life, and you take everything that you've learned for the good, and hopefully everything that you learned that wasn't good, you leave it, you park it, leave it in the parking lot, like we don't want to go back there. So it's an evolution. I mean, let's be honest, life is ever evolving.
Yeah, I love that, and it's something that I feel like a lot of people struggle with, though, is that
Mm,
again they kind of put things in these boxes of I was doing this job and now I'm in a new job, and so
mhm,
nothing transfers over.
mhm,
I have this hobby, or growing up, I used to do this. I used to be in drama. I used to do poetry, but now I'm not doing that anymore. Now I'm in sales, and so this is completely different. I need to learn everything from scratch.
yeah.
And I never realized that I just naturally always did the opposite. And it was every single thing, everything, single experience that I have, I try to take something from it, learn from it, keep it in, like the bank. And for me, what it really comes down to that helps me is almost not ignoring, but not putting the focus on the details,
Mhm,
right? And more looking at what is the root lesson that I'm learning here, right? And for me, it came up a lot professionally. And I've worked in a ton of different fields. I've done like construction to meal prep and delivery to hospitality, and all of these seemingly completely different fields. Um, and however, taking a step back and realizing, well, 90% of it's the same. You're still dealing with people. You're
mhm,
still, providing a service or creating a product or whatever it might be.
100%.
Sure, it's a little bit different, but if you take those lessons and, keep those close to your heart, how to deal with people, how to gain trust from people, when problems arise, how do you, do this conflict
Mhm,
resolution?
mhm,
Just because it's a painting project or somebody doesn't like the food at the table,
mhm.
you can actually take a lot of those, lessons and apply them in both areas. And so, were you always naturally inclined to think that way, where you're taking your experiences and applying them in other areas? Or was it more of a realization or a slower process of getting to that point?
No, I think looking back, I've always been like it, which again drives me to being very authentic. You know, what you see is what you get. Whereas I think some people try and put a bit more of a mask on. And often it's fear. I mean, let's be honest, it's fear based living. You know, that's where a lot of struggles personally come from. And that doesn't mean to say that I don't still get my fears as well. We do. But I think it was just, I always just threw myself into things, and I had a great trust, which again, hence the name of my practice is the Believer Junkie. People say like, well, why is it the Believer Junkie? I don't know. And I wasn't religious, Jared, on going to church every Sunday.
Mhm.
My mum liked to go to church, but she didn't enforce it on me and the rest of the family. It wasn't something we had to do. So when I kind of, again, going back to the NLP course, and then I started looking into The Secret, the book, which I'm sure everybody knows, or Law of Attraction, something connected with me. And it's like, it's just being your authentic self, throwing yourself into every situation and giving it your best shot, whatever that means. You know, just let the cards fall. Again, I've gone cold. Because whatever happens, if you can process it, and I think that's a key word, because that's probably where a lot of people get stuck from
Mm,
a mental capacity. They go through these challenges in life and it gets stopped, whether it's work, whether it's personal, whether it's a relationship. Something happens, they get to like a freeze moment and they don't talk about it, they don't process it. So what happens? It gets stored. And the more you go through those things, then trying to not go back to that thing that happened that scared you, it happens again. What's the law of attraction? You're living in so much resistance, it's happening again. And it's that fear that then drives you to being a person that, to me, authentically, you're not. Once you can cut those ties and let that go and process the emotion and cry and scream and do whatever it is that you need to do, which is perfectly normal. There's nothing wrong in having a good cry. It's one of the best releases that we can do. But once you do that and let go of that armor, you can go into any job, just like you said. Be your authentic self. Learn how to apply yourself. How do we speak to people, whether you're on a building site or whether you're walking into a bank? Whether you're giving a meeting to 100 area managers or whether you're giving a meeting to 100 children of the age of 5 to 8. It's how our application is what comes across. And I think the more authentic you are in every role that you do, it makes you different. And who wants to be the same? I mean, if we're all trying to be this cookie cutter person in this lifestyle, it's like, God, it all gets a bit repetitive. When you see somebody that's got a new idea or a new passion or a new way of talking, it's like, oh, I could listen to this person all day. It's so refreshing. And I think to encourage, and again, this is where you and I have said before, it's great that you and I are having this conversation. We need to be having these conversations regularly, and we need to be having them in schools. We
mm,
need to be teaching the children of today how to apply themselves, how that it's okay when you get scared, that it's okay when you want to cry. And as you move through life, if you do something, what can you take from that experience? You don't get asked questions like that in school. You don't sit down after something and go, okay, Jared, well, why did you think you felt like that? I don't know. Again, we don't challenge our brain. And then all of a sudden we get into our mid 20s, 30s, 40s, and we get overload of challenging our brains because we start to open up and we start to let go a little bit more around, don't care so much of what people think. We start to care more, I think, about what we think about ourselves. And that's where the learning and growth accelerates. But I think if we could start it off when we're 5 and 6, by the time we all get to mid 20s moving into our 30s, hey, we'd be ready to play a very different game.
for sure. And there's a ton of things I want to touch on in there. Um, but like for me and with my experience, I think that we're feeling that a lot more, and especially people around my age, because like my story of how I started the podcast, I always tell people, I dubbed it my quarter life crisis, and I was going
Yeah.
and started questioning everything that I was doing and asking different questions and asking questions about myself. And the more that I did that, the more I realized how many people go through something very similar, right? And I think it comes back down to on some of those points that you brought up of we a lot of times are almost forced into this box of what you should be, how you should act, whatever it might be. And deep down, that it's not necessarily authentic, or that you want, the things that you're supposed to do or supposed to feel don't resonate with you, and you shove them down and you repress them for a long time until it gets to a point where you say, like, why am I doing this? And you want to start asking those questions. You want to go deeper. You want to know, why I'm feeling like this, or why am I doing this? Why am I not allowed to pursue the thing that I want to pursue? Why am I not allowed to feel the way that I know that I feel, but it's not appropriate? It's not an appropriate reaction. And I think it just gets to that point, and it's usually a breaking point where everything starts bubbling up to the surface and you start asking these questions. And a lot of times either you make a big change,
Hmm.
right? Sometimes more of like a knee jerk reaction. I need to change something right now. And I don't know what it is, but I'm going to try to make a big change. Or you shove it down even further. And then it starts bubbling up, a couple of years later. And, something that I wanted to touch on too is that idea of the law of attraction,
Hmm.
right? And for me, I'm huge into mindset and, visualization and everything like that. I think that one thing that's missing from a lot of the conversations, though, is also the accountability part of, you can sit on your couch all day, not doing a thing, trying to will things into existence. Nothing's going to happen. You
Hmm.
need to, visualize it, think about it, but at the same time, you need to actually go out and do it. Right. And I think that second part is not talked about enough. And I'm just curious your thoughts on that, if you agree, disagree, or just, yeah, general thoughts on that second part of the law of attraction.
No, you definitely still need to have an action plan,
Yeah.
and the accountability thing is huge. And again, for me in coaching with clients, it's holding them accountable, and also letting them know and giving them permission to go after whatever they want, because they've been told so often through their life, well, you can't do that and you shouldn't have that and you don't want to do that. Well, what if I do want to do that and think like that? It's, you open the gates to go, what do you want? And so everything you just said, the visualization exercises, really ruminating in your thoughts to getting a planning. I would say the first thing is getting clarity. You've got to get clear, whether that's at your quarter life breakdown or your 30th breakdown. And we still have breakdowns, and I'm older than you, but it doesn't stop. Again, it never stops, because we're always reflecting. But the law of attraction, you're right. We go into this mindset, I think, of people going, okay, so if I just believe that I'm going to attract good things, I can just believe, and I can just sit here and believe that I'm going to attract good things. Yeah, it doesn't quite happen like that, though, does it? Because as you say, you're sitting on your couch and thinking somebody's going to offer you that, millionaire's dream job, or your husband's going to come and meet you. What do you think is just going to knock at the door? We've got to still pursue an action orientated thing to get out there, to do it. Um, so I just, with regards to like, well, what do you do? You know, I think knowing in what we put out there isn't always what we get back. And that's very important, because people think, well, and how do I use a good example? But, for me right now, I often think about like, I want to move to Australia. My sister lives in Australia. What am I doing living in the cold with the snow? You know, but for that instance, if I want to think about going to Australia, what else can I do? What else can I do? So I could join a Facebook group that connects Canadians to Australia. I might start going out to Banff and doing more walks with my dogs, because let's be honest, it's full of a lot of Kiwis and Australians. So what else can you do to sort of uncover that one potential goal and dream that you've put out into the universe, into the law of attraction? A bit like, again, if you want to go and get a job, say you want to go and get your dream job, yes, you can write your resume, you can keep sending it out there on Indeed, or different kind of job application sites. Is it enough? Act as if, can we start telling ourselves that? And Abraham Hicks, I don't know if you've heard of Abraham Hicks, very big law of attraction. I mean, I've studied Abraham Hicks for like 10 years. But it's act as if, and go general. So you don't need to pinpoint and get too specific, because otherwise you can get into wanting something so much, and the fact you don't have it, you then create more resistance in your own life that you won't attract it. Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah. It's for me, it's almost that idea of like overthinking on something.
Yeah.
If if you focus so hard on something, and you start getting more
Yeah.
frustrated, and less
Yeah.
ideas come and less ideas come. And a lot of times you need to go and do something to take your mind off of it. And that's
Yeah.
when the solution will
Yeah.
come to you. And that's kind of what
Yeah.
comes up for me when you're talking about
Yeah.
that.
Which is a bit like what she'll say, go general.
Yeah.
Just go general. Just say, I'm a good person and I'm going to get a great job, because I know that's what's going to happen. It's not that you're going to get that specific job with that name and that title and that salary to go with it, but it's putting, again, I talk about application, as I did in the last little conversation we had. How do you apply yourself Are you thinking the best thoughts that you can? Because one best thought today, next week might become a bad thought. You might have learned something new and it might change. And that's okay. Again, we can't put ourselves into these boxes that you and I keep talking about and get stuck. Because what if you meet someone else that offers you not quite the exact job that you were thinking, but it's got great prospects and it's kind of going to take you sideways? Then you can go up, but it's offering lots of benefits and lots of good things. Do you say no? Well, it's not exactly how I wanted it. It's not in that box. You close yourself off to an amazing opportunity. And sometimes that, I think, is what happens. People get a little bit close-minded. Again, it comes from fear, and there's nothing wrong with that. It can be worked on with somebody, to just help give you a new perception, give you some skills and some reassurance to know, just trust, just trust. And I know people might think, oh my God, that's really, really airy fairy, but it's not. That's what a lot of people don't have. They don't trust that the right thing is going to show. So they sit in this place and then they get overthinking and everything. And it just it goes from bad to worse and worse again.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, when I think about it, it's almost the idea that life happens for you, not to you.
Tony
Right.
Robbins.
And yeah, and switching your mindset around that. And the idea that just because you want something, maybe that's not actually where you're supposed to end up,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or um also, for me, it's like a big thing about taking control of the situation and finding the silver lining in it on situations that you have no control over, right? And then using your example of like wanting to move to Australia, right? If that was, call it a year and a half ago, you're feeling this big pull and I want to move to Australia, and then a worldwide pandemic hits
Yeah.
and you're not allowed to, right? Or it makes it much more difficult instead of, oh, of course, like as soon as, I've made up my mind on something, this happens to me. It's, well, maybe this is an opportunity to really test, how truthful and how strong that feeling is. When you're forced to stay here, when you're forced, when you're not allowed to move, it really puts it to the test, and it's almost like a stress test. Oh, did
Mm-hmm.
I actually want to move there? Or was I just, looking for a change, and that seemed like it was something that would fix some of these problems that um that I had, and that actually wasn't the root cause. That was more of a reaction, right? So yeah, I just trying to switch my thinking around that. And I'm curious, you've talked a lot about authenticity and clarity, and for me, like one of the things that I've struggled with the most is finding that clarity of, especially over this last year and a half, call it, not knowing exactly where I'm going. And I've been able to get clarity on what I don't want to do or when I'm heading in the wrong direction. However, it's been very tough for me to find clarity for specifically what I want to be doing. And I think I'm moving slowly in the right direction. But when I hear clarity, I go a very specific, like, this is my North Star, this is where I'm moving towards. How do you think about clarity, and how have you found people are able to find clarity?
Touching on what you just said about knowing what you don't want,
Yeah.
again, I use Abraham Hicks because it's one of the things that she will teach and sort of practice, is by knowing what you don't want, you'll know what you do want. So often I can go into a coaching or, a session and say to somebody, well, what makes you happy? I don't know. And I'm like, people don't know what make them happy. Okay, again, it's real. I'm not making this up. This is real. People don't know what makes them happy. Okay. And another thing I would say as well is, well, what made you happy when you was a child? There's Louise Hay, who's passed away now, but she was one of the first people that went into sort of mindfulness and mentorship. She would say, look to the child within. And again, chances are what you did as a child would, if it brought you happiness then, it would still bring you happiness now. And does that resonate for you? Like, are there things that you did as a kid that you would, and I'm not talking business or school or anything, like what did you do for fun, Jared, as a kid?
Yeah, and it's funny because I've heard that a lot too. And you saying, like, people come in and say, I don't know what makes me happy. That is me, right? And I've talked about this a lot for the past year with different people of what I think one of the biggest unlocks for me was realizing that I had made a lot of decisions about my life that weren't necessarily grounded on fact when I was
Hmm.
a child.
Hmm.
And because I had made them when I was so young, they had become truths in my body.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until recently when I started, again, putting them to the test of like, well, is this actually how I feel, or is this
How you
oh,
programmed.
exactly? And like for me, a big one was motivation. Like, what do I like doing? Because for me, I'm very professionally driven. I like, doing professional things and, business and, meeting people and whatever it might be. And then I had to take a step back and I went, oh, do I actually like doing that? Or am I doing it to gain the approval of
Hmm.
other people around me and, going into self worth and, feeling worthy of if I can show them accomplishments, I'll be worthy enough
Hmm.
as a person. And so that's where it was, oh, okay, I thought that I liked doing that, but is that actually just my programming? And so that has been a lot of the confusion for me over the last little while, where now I'm questioning everything that I think I know. Going back to me as a kid, it's funny because I was just always very curious. And that's a lot of, what I enjoy doing is learning new things and experiencing new things where I remember as a child, like I would be reading history books about the ancient Romans and ancient Greeks, and very much like liked the war aspect of them and learning about the military history of them and their armies and whatever it might be. And and for me it was just always learning. I liked learning new things and experiencing new things, which is great. And at the same time, it doesn't give me a specific thing to go towards, right? For me, I would much rather learn 100 new things than know to call it like 80%, than know, 99% of two things. That doesn't interest me. Once I know, a general idea of it, once I understand it, I want to move on because then I get bored and I want something new, right? And so that's where I try to put myself in situations where I'm trying new things, doing new things. And because I'm so general and have always been so general, I think it's really goes back to a lot of you hear the stories about other people and they have this very clear vision, they have this very clear goal.
Hmm.
And I think that's what I search for that I can't find. And so, for sure, looking at the things that I don't like has pointed me in the right direction. And that's why I say I feel that I'm moving in the right direction. I don't know where that end goal is yet.
No, you might never. I'm still searching in some aspects like you.
Yeah.
I still have one sister who is 3 years older than me, and she, from a very young age, wanted to work with children. So she was started babysitting at a young age, and when she left school, she went to college to study to get an accreditation in sort of nursery nursing and looking after children. Then she became a nanny for so many years. So again, she was still working in the area that she wanted to. And then she went into a school, and she's been in a school. So she's done what she wanted to do since the day she left school. And in some ways, I've often looked and gone, huh? Wow, that must be so nice. However, I go back to being a believer junkie in the fact that I do trust. And I think sometimes we just have to know that we outside the box thinkers, we were not put on this earth, Jared, to do that path. Because if we were, we'd be doing it.
Yeah.
My sister, clearly that was her journey. That's what she chose. And that's where she's, always gone. And for her, she's happy doing it. So we make no wrong in it. Fine. If she, fits into that little demographic, it's perfect. And she's very, very good at it as well in what she does. But for me, I was in dance, I was in drama, loved it, loved all of that. And then when I moved into business, I liked business. I liked growth, a little bit. What I'm a truth seeker, which very much is like you. Different ways, maybe. I've never been one to have my head in books. That's never been something that was an attraction for me. But a truth seeker in wanting to figure it out, And so I went into jobs and I would have to figure out the best way to do it because I would want those results. We're an accomplished being. And not everybody is like that. Does it make us wrong or bad that we do have that drive? Sometimes it can be unsettling because do we ever get to a point where we are truly, truly satisfied? And this is where I can say the thing for me between being a coach and still being in the business world, because I kind of get to do both. You get to use your business brain, and you get to do all of those things, and I get to then coach and help people with mindset, and that truly is what I love. I'm always looking at ways to merge the two together. I'd love to be a part of a huge empire, like a training empire. I really, even now, I have no desire to always go, look what I did. I'd much rather go, look what we did.
Yeah.
Could you imagine, like, because to me, two brains are better than one, four brains are better than two, and when you've got people with outside the box thinking, and you've all got similar mindsets, but different skills as well, if that makes sense. Like, could you imagine? You look at like Lewis Holmes, the School of Greatness. Could you imagine like opening? And why can't we do it? Why can't we open, in Calgary, the mindset school of awesomeness, and actually have people that we get to run a business, so we get to grow the business, we get to look at the bottom line and do that accomplished feeling, but we get to teach kids, we get to teach adolescents, we get to teach young adults right the way through to seniors. This would be a dream of mine, to then merge that business and that coaching aspect together. So I think it's just trying to find what it is like you're good at, as you say. Maybe like for me, if I think, well, what made me happy as a child? Dancing. And I don't just mean dancing in a classroom, just putting music on and just dancing in my bedroom or doing whatever. Again, the creative aspect. I used to pull rose petals off flowers next to the school where I lived, put them in a jar with water, making perfume. Well, you could say I've been entrepreneurial then from the age of like 7. I used to do finger knitting and make bracelets and knock on people's door next to where I lived and see if they wanted to buy them. It's crazy. Like, the average person doesn't do that. So I think, like, for you, you've been in lots of different businesses, so you definitely have an entrepreneurial mindset, and you've got that drive and ambition and that truth seeker in you. Are there certain subjects that you like to read about more? Maybe that will drive you to more of an area or an industry that you can merge your mindset into that truth seeking, and find what it is that you love, so you never have to work another day in your life.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's so funny too, thinking back on it, of realizing I loved reading as a kid and now I struggle to,
Hey,
and I'm trying to force myself to actually read, and just, the shifting through it. And I'm curious, going back to authenticity, because I think it's a huge thing that has come up a lot in my life, and being authentic. And what is, like, when I say what is authenticity to you, what kind of comes up first?
having
Um,
no fear.
Having
So,
no fear. Okay.
because I think when you've got no fear, you're as authentic as being, whether you do things right, wrong, indifferent, whether you get scolded for doing things because, somebody might have thought it was bad or good, but you're just so authentic down to your true being that you can't not do it that way you want to do it. Whereas once those walls come up and you start hearing, well, you shouldn't do this, that's not the right way of doing it, and we listen, if we really start paying attention to that external world, um, yeah, then I think you lose that authenticity, because you start to want to be somebody that people think you should be. I wasn't like that, and I was very, very fortunate that I had a mum and dad that supported me. My dad was very gregarious and had a big personality, and still does. My mum sadly passed away 20 years ago, but was still a very strong character, and I guess encouraged me to be that crazy, happy, mystical little girl that I was. And in some ways, even now at the age I am, I still am. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah.
I think it is the fear driven, and again, we either live in fear, lack, and scarcity, or we live in like hope, joy, and confidence, and often it's like, well, how do I get over there? It comes back to what we said at the beginning, Jared, about processing things that have happened.
Mhm.
That's the hard thing. There's nothing that can happen to anyone that you can't learn from. And to me, if I was to say something now to, your people listening, or to anyone that's listening from my side, just accept what's happened and be okay. Even if you think it's the darkest thing that you did, or it's the worst thing that you said, as long as you can first of all acknowledge it, You can apologize for something if you honestly do think you've done something that was where you acted out, and find out then why, because again, it's coming from another trigger. But if we can say something, in haste, and then be like, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have said that, I'm not sure why I did that, again is being authentic. We don't always get it right. We don't have a list of rules that give you these are the 10 perfect ways to live. There's no such thing,
Yeah.
because my 10 ways of perfect living would be completely different to yours. And that's the thing. We are all unique, which goes back to being authentic. If we could all just be in our own skin and be in our own bodies and accept ourselves for what we are, whether we're loud, whether we're quiet, whether we're confident or whether we're a bit more reserved, as long as we're doing it from an authentic place and we are okay with it, then we are being authentic, to ourselves. It's if we're doing things like you say, are we doing this because we require that validation from someone because there's something lacking? Are we being introvert and reserved because we're scared, because somebody's made us feel so, you know, sort of downtrodden about ourselves that we daren't show our true colors? There's always reflections that we can look at. And this is where that processing of emotions, it's learning to be emotionally intelligent, which sadly a lot of people aren't. And people go, well, does that make me bad? No, it doesn't make you bad, but excuse me, it's encouraging people to know everybody can get more emotionally intelligent. People want to go and study and be an MBA or be a lawyer. They go to school, they do all the studying in the world. Why don't people study about the brain?
Yeah.
Why don't we learn mindset, and do that at school in an aspect like a school classroom? No, we'll learn math, we'll learn English, we'll learn science, we'll learn these things. Well, what about our brains? We've got to live with these things for a long time. That's what screws us up,
Yeah.
constantly and all the time.
For sure. And, I think something that you touched on is super important and not talked about a lot is that a big part of being authentic is acknowledging your downsides, right? Call it your shadow self,
Yeah.
right? And, leaning into those that you're not perfect and you have things that, you wish would be better, or sometimes you have bad thoughts, or sometimes you're selfish, sometimes you give too much, sometimes, it's different for everybody, but acknowledging those aspects of yourself as well, and, not feeling the shame around it. It was really interesting because I've never thought of authenticity from a place of fear before. And, one thing that I have been digging into this year was, I want to put a big effort into training my body and learning the difference between true fear out of my safety and emotional fear, right? Because I think that fear is a big part of our biology and a lot of times keeps us safe, right? And maybe it's not fear, maybe it's intuition, whatever it might be. But, we evolved to have fear to keep us alive.
Yeah.
However, now in modern society, we're not in all of these life or death situations, on a daily basis. And so, and, even the fact of having that fear of being ostracized or cast out of society, because, when we were evolving, that meant death, right? If
Mhm.
you didn't have the community, if you were kicked out of the tribe, you died.
Done. Yeah.
And so having a lot of the fear come from that, but that's no longer the case a lot of times. And so training myself and to distinguish between the two kinds of fear of is this like a real fear that is actually trying to keep me safe, or is this an emotional fear? And realizing that emotional fear is okay. That's what you want to push through. That's what you want to work on. That's how you want to
Yeah.
challenge yourself.
Yeah.
But I guess, just thinking about it right now, I still think that fear has a role to play,
Yeah.
but I think it's distinguishing behind it and not letting your life be run by it. I'm just curious if you
It
have any
does.
thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would say, fear in anything, it helps us to grow if we learn to look at it that way.
Yeah.
Again, as I was saying to you earlier, just because I coach, it doesn't mean I don't get fear. It doesn't mean I have all the answers. It doesn't mean that my life's better than anybody else's. Excuse me. It just means that I've learned to use different tools to get through these things, to get through these fear barriers. And if I get to a place where something maybe has triggered me, and it's getting my emotions up, which again, it's coming from fear. When we get triggered, that's fear. It's learning to, how do we get back down?
Yeah.
So is it breathing? You know, is it using water? Water's a very good one, to just throw onto your face, have a shower. I remember when I had my own business and I'd been to Australia to visit my sister and had this reading, and this woman had said to me, you need to use water. Through these times when you're with your clients, if you find that you're getting sort of like, oh, just go and have a shower. And I was like, wow, this is like crazy. You know what? I did it, and I've told so many other people about it, Jared. Like, go and just let it wash over you. So it's finding ways to release that fear, get yourself back down to homeostasis. And when you're back into a comfortable state of mind, then you can decipher, okay, now let's relook at that situation. Was it fear being driven by emotion, or was it fear being driven by fact?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I
You
love
know,
that.
but as soon as you get triggered, you're gone. And I don't mean gone as in, there's just no point in trying to do anything when someone's in a triggered state. Get them back down once they're feeling calm again. Okay, now let's have a conversation. Why did you think that, or why may you have thought that? A lot of it's going to go back to childhood, because that's where we're trained and programmed, and that's where we can learn to retrain and reprogram ourselves. And again, the number one thing would be to know it's all okay.
Yeah.
We can figure anything out with a conversation. That should be a bumper sticker on everybody's cars. We can figure everything out with a conversation, because you truly can. It's just people don't want to have the conversation because they're in fear. It's topsy-turvy. You're like going around this little hamster wheel. Well, I don't want to talk because I'm in fear. Yeah, but if you don't talk, you'll never get out of fear.
Yeah.
It's just learning these things to go, okay, take a deep breath, go for counseling, get a therapist, have a coach, whatever it is that you need. If you've got a good friend, it's just as good. But sometimes talking to somebody can bring more fear, which you think, really? Because shouldn't the people around us be the ones that can support us the most? It doesn't always work like that. When you go and talk to someone that doesn't know you, they've got no judgment. They don't know you from Adam, and they don't care anything that you're bringing to the table. They're not going to judge at all. So sometimes I think that's why it's easier to go and, find someone that you can just talk to and just vomit, vent, get everything out on the table. And once you start then figuring stuff out, then you can go back and have conversations with your friends, because chances are you're going to inspire them as well.
Yeah. No, I love that idea too. And it's something I think a lot about, of having your different support systems and different communities, and they all, serve a different role,
Yeah, they do.
and they all have their advantages and their disadvantages. And it's not, you only do this one or this is the right one to do. It's,
Of course it
incorporating
is.
them and finding which ones work for you. And so I talk a lot about, you know, when I started seeing my therapist and how much she's helped me and everything around that. And that was when I talk to it about people when they're curious. One of the things that I bring up is that she doesn't have these, 20, 25 years of baggage of being in it, with me, like your family does, or maybe
Yeah,
your friends do, or
yeah.
whatever it might be. And having that ability to see it from the outside looking in, and sometimes just having that unemotional look. And it's so easy, or sorry, not easy, obvious, right? And they'll see obvious things that you don't see because you're right there in it every
Yeah.
day and you've been living it your entire life. And on the opposite side, you have those communities and support systems that have the baggage, that have been there with you for a really long time, and they can fill a different role. And for me, over the last 2 years, there's been lots of different communities. There's my friends, there's my family, there's the men's group that I was a part of, there's my therapist. You know, Realizing that different you can get different things out of these different communities and different support systems.
100%.
And it doesn't need to necessarily be a one size fit all. It's not, this one thing that you do or this one person will fulfill all of your needs. And for me, it was a big, trying to integrate that into, it is okay if a certain group or a certain person only fills, some of the needs and some of my wants. That's more than okay. They don't have to be the absolute everything end all be all for me in my life.
Yeah, and again, it's like you say, we try and just go in that box
Yeah,
instead of pushing all the walls down of that box and just going, hey, we can have 8 communities. We don't have to just have one.
yeah,
We don't have to just have the family. If you've got your family around you, that's
yeah,
kind of not, yeah, it's not how you have to live. But again, we're conditioned to think that that's the only support system we have because that's what we grow up in. If we're lucky enough, some people don't always grow up in that family,
yeah,
sort of a bond. And then again, as we go to schools, if people join sports, that becomes another community. It's often a place where people can get, I mean, I know for me in all the dancing I did with my teachers, I learned a lot of discipline
yeah,
from that. And that's stayed with me. I mean, I danced a lot. You learn different things from these communities. And I think on the other side of it as well, Jared, we have to be okay to let these communities go when they've served their purpose.
yes.
Because and again, and that can be for friends, or loved ones, as we all know. You go through relationships, or friendships, and people can often be like, oh my God, like I'm not sure like what happened. Again, if you've said your piece, if you've said you're sorry, sometimes you don't even know why. You just drift apart.
Yeah,
You're going to a community every week, you're doing a network group, and then you miss one, and then all of a sudden you don't get the next invite, and then you don't go, and you think, why did it stop? Again, we have that very curious mind, but sometimes we have to know that people, again, reasons, seasons, and lifetimes.
yeah, yeah,
People come into your life for a reason. You can think you're going to be the best friend and the best buddy, and you're going to have them in your life forever. And then they've gone. And you think, wow, did you learn something though? Did you take something, or maybe even observed? I'm not even said you had to learn, but did you observe something about them or what they were doing that made you think, I want to do that because that really looked good on them and it really worked? Or do you look at other people as a pure mindful observation and go, I'm really glad that person showed up in my life to show me this because I would not do that.
yeah,
Again, we don't always have to look at people for the wants in life, for the things that we think we should be doing better. We can also learn from how people do things to judge your own personalities of going, that didn't sound great what that person just said. I wouldn't speak like that to somebody in that environment. And it's, again, we learn so much from the communities around us, but we do have to be willing to let them go and find new communities. We're like plants, keep watering us and we'll keep growing.
yeah. And I think it was a big lesson for myself too, was to listen to those gut feelings as well. Of just because I'm close with this person or I have a relationship, whatever it might look like, there are certain things that didn't sit right with me.
Hmm.
However, because I wanted and I had this almost romanticized version of
Yeah,
them in my brain, I
yeah,
went, I justified it for myself. And so
yeah.
really, pausing, taking that minute to go, why didn't I like that? And, kind of what core value did that hit on for me? And listening to it instead of sweeping it under the rug, because that just leads to unhealthy behaviors and relationships. And, again, I'm a real big believer that it'll always come back up, right?
It does.
Eventually, it shows up in a lot of different ways. It can show up in, explosions. It can show up in, you know, um, behaviors. It can show up in a lot of different ways. But, if you don't look at it and you let, I always say, like, keeping it in the dark, if you let it fester, it's going to show up in different ways. And so, shining a light on it, working through it, and then deciding, like, what purpose is this showing me, or what lesson have I learned from this? I just think is so important.
And often the lessons you learn, Jared, you don't always, again, personal experience. To me, you don't always make sense of why it happened.
Yeah,
But this is what I've realized. The experience you go through is teaching you something, whether you realize it or not, if you can have that mindfulness to sort of reflect on it. But then you think, then maybe I'm going to help someone else. Maybe I'm going to come into contact with someone. And because of what I've gone through, because of the experience I've just, moved through, even though I have no idea why I attracted all this to my life, again, why did I bring this? I did for a reason. But then you move over here and there's someone else that's going through a similar experience, and you just become like an angel to them. And they're like, oh my God, thank you so much. How did you know this? Well, I guess that's why I had to learn it. So again, sometimes it's got a bigger a bigger meaning to it than just being about the experience that you're going through at that time for your own personal reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And, I feel like I could talk to you about this all day. But we are
Pleasure.
wrapping, we are,
Come back again.
yeah. um, but like as we wrap up here, is there anything that we didn't get to that you wanted to talk about? Anything that you wanted to bring up? Any kind of final thoughts for everybody?
No, it's just for anybody that's listening to I would just encourage all of them to go out and try and find someone to talk to, and just don't be scared. I could say don't be nervous, but you're all going to be nervous because it's hard. It's hard to talk about something that's got so much meaning to
Mhm.
it. And that's why you care so much, because if you didn't care, it wouldn't have the meaning. People will be like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. When you care about something so deeply, whether it's a family problem, whether it's a work situation, whether it's a personal relationship, whether it's just a friend, when you care, that's coming from a place of love. That's coming from a place of authenticity. So just hold some space for yourself and anything of a thought or an emotion, and then try and find a channel, a community in some way to process it. Because as soon as you start processing it, let it go. And I can assure you, just in the people that I've helped to coach, and even in my own, still my own personal growth, you're never alone. You always think the one thing you're thinking, oh my God, I don't want to tell anybody that because they're going to think I'm crazy, or they're going to think like, oh wow, she's in a really dark place. Or no, everybody, there's so many people thinking that same thought, having that same emotion, what you've had, which I think is testament to you doing this podcast. Isn't that why you did it? You start doing it, all of a sudden get people going, yeah, I had those same thoughts at like my quarter interval. I'm having that quarter life breakdown. And at the time, if you look back and would have thought, oh God, this is going to be really tough for me, all of a sudden you go, holy moly. Like there's a big percentage of people in that same age group all thinking the same. So that would be my thing, to just encourage people, because the minute we can start to dissolve that fear,
Yeah.
we can start to really just grow that authenticity and get out there and live life, guys. It's precious. Again, I lost my mum 20 years ago. If it's the one thing that it made me do, live. When somebody said, do you want to come to Canada? I'm like, sure. My
Yeah.
friends back home were like, oh my God, it happened within, well, I got a call in December. By March, I quit my job. And by April, I'd moved here.
Great.
It was quick, don't mess about. Because I said at the end of the day, you can always go home. If you're going to try and get on a new path and go down it, just go down it. You can always turn the car around and go back home.
Yeah.
And isn't that the truth? In anything we do, it's just going, okay, having that gumption, I'm gonna do it. That comes from encouragement, it comes from reassurance, and it comes from trusting and believing in yourself, and just that you're being taken care of. So
Yeah.
yeah, just each and every one of you, go raise the roof. Come on, go
Yeah.
live your life.
I love that. I think that's such an important point, that nothing is permanent, right? You can always change your mind afterwards, but seizing it and trying it in the first place is the important part. And just because you hit such a nerve on what you were saying before, it was one of the most freeing parts and points in my life, was the day that I realized that I was not alone in my struggles.
Amazing.
Because I held so much shame around, I'm the only one that struggles with this. I'm the only one that thinks this way. And it, just compounded the effects that, oh, nobody else struggles with this, and therefore I can't talk to anybody about it. And so it weighed on me more, which made me want to talk about it less and think again, I was isolated more, and it's just a vicious cycle. And that really was one of the driving factors in me talking about the things that I talk about, because the amount of weight that was lifted off my shoulders, and the day that I found out I wasn't alone, it was so freeing. And I want to, hopefully pass that on to other people as well. So
Yes.
thank you so much for this. The last question that I ask everybody who comes on is, what does this next phase in your journey look like?
Just growing this business more and more, and I don't mean it the growth from the business side so much, but just being able to help people more
Yeah.
and more. I think we live in a time and age now where it's not taboo to talk about our feelings and emotions, whereas perhaps it once was. So for me to just go and sprinkle my Mani magic, as I call it, and just shine the light on more things, because, and I think the one thing as well from my standpoint is what we coach about, we often need ourselves.
Yeah.
So the more we give out to the world, the more we're reassuring them. We're re-educating our own minds every day. There's nothing more empowering than having these types of conversations, because it's like an hour's therapy and you come away going, yeah, I just told myself all of this stuff that's true,
Yeah.
and then you go out into the world and you keep doing it. But we always need to go back, we always need to raise that bar and revisit those things. So for me, yeah, it's just continuing to do what I'm doing, continuing to help more people in what I can, and have the school of mindset and awesomeness, and yeah, have every child from being 5 right the way through to 65 come and take part, because that would just be an absolute dream. Helping everybody, to just trust their emotions and be okay with their thoughts would be a complete blessing.
I love that. And if anyone wants to connect with you or follow you, learn more about you, where would be the best place for them to go?
You can Google Believer Junkie. I have a website, www.believerjunkie.com. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn as Germaine Cookson. But yeah, if you want to reach out, if I can do anything to help you or anyone that's close to you, we're all looking for different things. Then yeah, by all means, I'd be more than happy to help, Jared. It's been a pleasure to do this with you today. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. The pleasure is all mine. I really appreciate this conversation.